Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Immune Support for Winter Wellness. My name is Susan Blakis and I'm the Training Development Coordinator at Now Foods, and as such, I bring you these webinars on the third Thursday of each month. If you've missed any of them, you can find replays on our website at nowfoods.com/webinars or on the Now Foods YouTube channel. Today's webinar will be presented by one of Now's very own, Jim Golick. And before we begin, I'd also like to welcome Neil Levin and thank him for the slides that are being used in today's presentation. So with that, please join me in welcoming Jim Golick for Immunity Support for Winter Wellness.
Okay, thank you, Sue. If everybody can hear me all okay, we're going to get started. So as Sue had mentioned, Neil is responsible for the slides that we're going to be talking about today, and my name is Jim Golick. I have been associated with Now since the 1980s as manager of one of the Fruitful Yield stores, and had done nutrition counseling for a long time. And Neil and I go back to the early 90s when we met, and we were going through the training and test taking to become CCNs, or Certified Clinical Nutritionists. So Neil has a very long history in the industry as well. And these are some of his credentials: board certified clinical nutritionist. He's past co-founder of the American Nutrition Association, and been on the clinical nutrition certification board, and been with the Mid-America Health Organization and has technical advisory board on GMO project, among many other things, as our senior nutrition manager of our system. So today's world is full of challenges to our immune systems, now more than ever. We are not going to talk about specifics necessarily related to the topic of recent concern, but we're going to talk about in general how our immune system can be affected for good or ill. So an example of that, common cold, is associated with a lot of medical and socioeconomic consequences, but there are currently no effective treatments for prevention of rhinovirus infections. And that's something that we can treat with antihistamines, nasal decongestants, analgesics, but they have limited effectiveness, maybe 15, 25% at the peak. And I kind of learned that lesson many, many years ago when I was a teenager, that these over-the-counter medications may have dried up my sinuses and helped a cold symptom, but it made it drag on longer. And I learned earlier on that natural approaches were probably a better way to turn. And here I am today. So antibiotics also don't help. There are no limited medical options if you have a virus. And flu drugs also, if they're used, would need to be taken within 48 hours and may only reduce symptoms for about 1.5 days, which also kind of ties in with flu vaccine efficacy rates. Here's data from 2004 to 2018. If you look over on the right-hand column next to the most right-hand column, so the second right-hand column where it says adjusted overall VE percentage, there's a range of 10% up to about 60% in terms of any given efficacy from one year to the next. And it might average about 40, 50, 60%, which means that flu vaccines are never 100% effective. The drug oseltamivir, or also known as Tamiflu, some of the questions have been raised about its efficacy and maybe some fudging of data. Despite that, back 11 years ago, there were billions of dollars of sales of this being stockpiled, and possibly still going on that kind of way today. Not the way we necessarily have to do things, or there are other options. Some of the common sense things that we've been hearing from the CDC for years, and especially in recent months: cover your nose and mouth with a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Throw the tissue in the trash can, obviously. Wash your hands often with soap and water. We think we know the 20-second rule by now. Alcohol-based hand cleaners can also be effective, and try to avoid contact with sick people. So there are some differences between cold and flu viruses. Colds, you can have over 100 different strains. Flu, there's 3 major strains that can happen. It can be affecting the respiratory tract in different ways. Flu may affect the entire respiratory system from the lungs up to the head. With cold, it's generally more likely to be in the head area. Symptom onset can be gradual with cold, and it can be rather sudden with flus. And there are other commonalities and distinguishing features as well, such as not likely to have a fever, maybe a low-grade fever with a cold versus typically a fever with the flu. We won't go through any more of those details. So, excuse me a second. When people are exposed to bacteria or virus, it can stimulate the immune system to create antibodies that facilitate the entry of another strain of the virus or disease. So what that means is it can weaken the immune system and increase our susceptibility. One of the reasons why people that might get a viral attack may have secondary bacterial infections that sometimes are treated with antibiotics. And there also are concerns that flu shots, especially repeated ones over a period of time, could react or interact in ways that we may not be able to predict. There actually can be increased contagiousness that can occur. But again, our focus today is not on drug therapies and vaccine research. The focus of our talk today is going to be on healthy immunity. So the immune system has a number of branches. It's when it's working right, it's a carefully coordinated, multifaceted response that includes a number of different white blood cells that have a variety of weapons at their disposal to be able to help in a quick fashion or sometimes over a longer term fashion. And we're going to talk about this in a little more detail. So our innate immunity is what we get from birth, what hopefully mother especially gives us and continues if we are fortunate to have been breastfed, give us a better innate immunity. And it is hardwired to respond rapidly to microorganisms. It is also known as non-specific immunity. So the main purpose is to immediately prevent the spread and the movement of foreign pathogens throughout the body. And that could take the form of physical barriers such as the skin and mucous membranes, as well as cellular protection consisting of macrophages and natural killer cells and dendritic cells and mast cells, which are all part of the white blood cell functions of our body. So innate immunity is non-specific immunity. So it's not dependent upon antigen. So it's antigen independent. There is an immediate response typically, but exposure does not create memory. So there's no immunologic memory that is created in this regard, which is why we can be prone to colds frequently throughout our lifetime if we're not able to stave them off as well. Now, adaptive immunity is more specific immunity. So it's antigen dependent, and there is a lag time between exposure and maximal response. And this is why sometimes it takes a while for our system, if we're coming down with the flu bug, to recover. It could take a week or two, sometimes longer in that regard. And again, it's also the concept of vaccine when given is to help to stimulate an antigen response that then results in memory, so that years later, hopefully and theoretically, we will be able to respond in a vigorous, more quick response to that viral pathogen. Adaptive immunity is also considered the second line of defense against non-self pathogens. and again involves T cell, B cell lymphocytes. T cell lymphocytes we're going to be covering in a moment and how it got its name. So here's a picture on the far right. You'll see this picture of the human body, and you'll see bone marrow stem cells. You see in the center of that box thymus, and then the word T cells. So T cells got their name because they come from the bone marrow, but they are immature cells. They go to the thymus, and the thymus gland in our chest helps to train the T cells to be good infection-fighting soldiers. And they can travel to the spleen and lymph nodes throughout our body and help in that coordinated response that we may need. Key nutrients in this regard are things like vitamin A, which is necessary for healthy mucous membranes, white blood cells, immune response, vitamin C, zinc, which also helps support thymus function. Then there is a coordinated role between zinc and vitamin A. Zinc is a component of retinol binding protein, which is necessary for transporting vitamin A in the blood. Selenium also is quite important. We're going to be talking about that later on throughout our talk. It does influence both types of immune cells, the B and T lymphocytes. And deficiency is associated with decreased production of T lymphocytes in response to harmful organisms. So very important to make sure that we have these nutrients, which we'll talk about in greater detail. Now, nutrients and host defense. There's evidence that nutrient status of the host even affects the genetic expression of viruses. So a virus can sense the weakness in the body. It can find our weak links and seek to attack us at that point. And so this is what we're going to be focusing on here today, is how to strengthen our immune defenses. So an unsuitable environment like the well-nourished body inhibits the ability of the virus to freely replicate and thrive. And so malnutrition has long been associated with increased susceptibility to infectious disease. For instance, vitamin A deficiency is associated with more severe measles infections and a higher rate of mortality. The increase in severity from and susceptibility to infectious disease in malnourished hosts is thought to be the result of an impaired immune response. So the response can be muted and not as vigorous as it could otherwise be. So although the immune response has been demonstrated to be impaired in nutritionally deficient hosts, here's a report. Our laboratory has also shown that the viral pathogen itself may be affected by the nutritional deficiency. The virus can become more aggressive. Thus, both the host as well as the pathogen can be influenced by the nutritional status of the host. Several viruses have been shown to develop increased virulence due to changes in their genomes as a result of replicated nutritionally deficient hosts as well. So the mechanism for the viral genomic changes is not well understood, although it appears to be related to increased oxidative stress in the deficient host. So oxidative stress is that firestorm that is created in our body. Like we can have symptoms of feeling so darn fatigued and wiped out. Joints will ache, or why we could have just, feel sore in our joints and just feel so lousy. That's the oxidative stress that is being created in that regard. Now, oxidation can also be used by the body as part of the weapons of war to defend ourselves. So there is a battle going on, and we can find ways to help that process along. Then hopefully the symptoms would be lessened as a result, or preferably we prevent this war from ever starting. So selenium deficiency is an example. Mice deficient in selenium, more susceptible to infection with the Coxsackie virus as well as influenza virus. They also develop severe pneumonitis when infected with a mild strain of influenza. So didn't take much, a mild strain, again, on top of this load of other compounds, other viruses, to knock the immune system off base. And the immune system, again, was altered in the selenium deficient animals, as was the viral pathogen itself. So again, emphasizing the importance of host nutrition, We want to optimize the host immune response and prevent viral mutations, which could increase the pathogenicity of the virus. And what nutrients and ingredients that can support immune competence? There are quite a few. Here is a wonderful article, very recent, from April of this year. The role nutrition plays in supporting the immune system is well established. Many nutrients, vitamins A, B6, B12, C, D, E, folate, trace elements, zinc, iron, selenium, magnesium, copper, omega-3 fatty acids, all can play important and complementary roles working together in supporting the immune system. Inadequate intake is widespread, which I think is no surprise. We'll get back to that subject toward the end of our talk. Okay, GI health, very important. Acids, enzymes, and probiotics in our immune support. So we'll start with probiotics. The intestinal epithelium and the biofilms that probiotics help to create form a continuous physical and a functional barrier that protects the internal environment of the body. So important. Now, we know that hydrochloric acid is helpful for digestion. However, hydrochloric acid can also help our body in its immune barrier state in our stomach. One of the purposes of hydrochloric acid is to help to present in such an acidic environment that it actually inhibits the growth or kills outright viruses, germs, bacteria, fungi that are coming down the pike in the food that we just ate. So this is one of its functions beyond just protein digestion. So it does, the immune system in the gut also can help to target undigested proteins as well as live organisms, which is basically what I just was talking about. Now, if we could take this slide and split it in half from top to bottom, over on the right, you'll see more intact intestinal villi. Those are the finger-like projections that are there on the screen that allow a coordinated and limited entry of compounds through the villi, through the epithelial cells to get into the body and get into the bloodstream or into the lymph system. Now over on the left, you'll see the blue sections. Those are examples of impaired damage to the villi, what we could refer to as leaky gut, which allows compounds through that can trigger immune reactions, and that can certainly be food allergens as well as germs. So when it comes to probiotics, we know quite a bit about them now. The strain of a probiotic to be qualified must be safe, and it must be identified by appropriate molecular techniques, and it must have clinically proven health benefits. And one of the ways that we have to do this is a quite sophisticated ribo printer that we acquired about 5 years ago. At the time, we were the only company in our industry to have this device, and I'm not sure where we are today 5 years later, but likely one of the few that have that. So it is used by our microbiology lab to actually help to identify the RNA fingerprint of certain specific species of bacteria that we get. We order it and we can compare it to make sure that the fingerprint matches up, so to speak. We can also use it not just for our probiotics, but also for pathogens we may want to test for as well. One of the many firsts that Now Foods is responsible for over the years. Now, the only certain way to establish a true quality and value of a probiotic is by researching it in vitro, test tube, in vivo, live animal studies, and in particular human clinical trials. So probiotics can support antibody production, and they can improve the efficiency of vaccines by provoking an enhanced immune response. Now, we're not going to get into the vaccine debate, the pros and cons today, but the purpose of vaccines is to provoke an enhanced immune response. Sometimes it's a weaker response and the vaccine may not be as effective as it could otherwise be. The probiotics could actually help this process to be more vigorous in that regard. Now, there are a number of strains that we use in our probiotics, but two in particular, the Bifidobacterium lactis 04 and the Lactobacillus 14 have been two in particular that have been studied in humans that have shown specific immune responses. And here's an example of the BL04 when given immediately after antibiotic feeding. It'd be the second from the left chart. You see the grayish box show quite a reduction in the bifidobacterium count in the placebo group versus those people receiving the bifidobacterium lactis BL04 that had nearly normal results. 4 days after, even better results after, well, not 4 days, 4 days post-antibiotic, and 13 days post-antibiotic showing even greater response. So a very good illustration of the importance of taking our probiotics when we are taking antibiotics if we need them, as well as in the immediate aftermath of the post-antibiotic regimen. Now, we also have mouth and respiratory probiotics that play a role in the mouth and the body for helping protect us against stress, disease, aging, and medications. One notable one is Bliss K12, which is a unique form of good Streptococcus bacteria. Yes, there are some good strep bacteria. This is one, Streptococcus salivarius, one of the most numerous bacterial species in the oral cavity. It not only functions in the mouth and the throat, but also in the digestive tract. And it competes with other organisms to protect the oral cavity. That's one way that it kind of outmuscles other organisms to help, but also produces compounds that can actually help discourage other undesirable cells from replicating. And where did it come from? Well, besides naturally occurring in healthy oral cavity of individuals, it also was originally isolated from an unusually healthy 12-year-old. Now, when children are colonized with Bliss K12, these cells migrate to the tonsils, adenoids, and the nasal pharynx. The eustachian tube also is important in that regard. It connects, the mouth or the nose and the throat to the inner ear, and it's very important to help in this regard in a lot of different ways. We'll come back to that later when we talk about specific products. Botanicals. Andrographis paniculata is shown to support a healthy and balanced immune response. It modulates the immune system's production of immune cells. Black elderberry, I think many of us are very much focused on that material today. It can be a standardized extract that can be helpful in providing protection against oxidative stress, and contains naturally occurring small amounts of vitamins A, in form of beta-carotene, other carotenoids, and vitamin C, as well as anthocyanins, which are very important and potent free radical scavengers. One of my favorites we're about to talk about, Epicor. Epicor has been shown in scientific studies to support the body's ability to initiate the proper immune response at the appropriate time, thereby helping maintain a healthy immune system. And what we know about Epicor, it is a compound that was produced or discovered from a company that had been making a yeast material for the animal feed industry since I think the 1930s. And they found out about roughly 20-25 years ago that the workers exposed to breathing the dust in the factory had a more vigorous immune response. They seemed to be healthy through the winter compared to the office workers that tend to have their usual winter ailments. So they did more research and developed Epicor for human population, which is pretty neat. So when used on a daily basis, can support the proper function of the immune system, bringing it into a state of balance. There have been 7 clinical trials conducted, and it has a rapid immune system effect, and there was a significant reduction in symptoms and recovery time in regard to seasonal challenges. Important thing I want to point out that supports a balanced immune response. So our immune system always must be thought of in balance, because we can have an overly aggressive immune system response that can actually hurt us, autoimmune diseases in particular, or again, if we get some viral attack that really sends us low, there's some of those aches and pains and fevers and things that I talked about earlier when we feel so lousy. We can modulate some of that response, still help our immune system, but doesn't have to be in such a vigorous fashion. So Epicor does have that ability to help the balanced immune response, leading to working fast. And I can attest to that, having used this in several of our products over the last 15 years. It has been extremely amazing in that regard. Large arabinogalactans come from the large tree. They help to support healthy intestinal flora because they are a prebiotic fiber. That's one of the ways that they work. But they also stimulate the immune system through the activation of phagocytosis and other effects. Now, phagocytosis is that engulfing, digesting by a white blood cell of a foreign compound. Next, we have beta-1316 glucans, which are derived from mushrooms and grains, and especially baker's and brewer's yeast. So these are believed to serve also as prebiotics to feed beneficial intestinal microbes involved in immunity. And then we also have immune mushrooms, turkey tails, sun mushroom, maitake, cordyceps, black hoof, which is not as well known, lion's mane, reishi, shiitake. Olive leaf is something that's been with us for a while. Contains oleuropenes, which help maintain a healthy respiratory functions. It acts as immune response modulators in humans. Let's go on to vitamins and minerals. Vitamin A. Malnutrition has long been associated with increased susceptibility to infectious disease. Well-known examples is association of vitamin A deficiency with the development of severe measles infections, which is the second time we've been introduced this slide for emphasis that, again, we want to maintain our healthy state and not be in a malnourished state if we can help it. Okay, vitamin C plays roles in also several aspects of immunity, including the growth and function of immune cells and antibody production as well. Now, with this chart is showing the enhanced absorption into immune cells of alpha lipoic acid. So that's the at the top right-hand section of that chart, where you see AA, that's ascorbic acid, RH is rose hips, and ALA is alpha lipoic acid. So this has been shown to help when added with vitamin C to help with getting it into the immune system cells, which is where it belongs. And here's another example of from another chart in a cell culture study, how it can also help, showing how that it gets into cells. And here is another chart showing basically the same thing, what vitamin C with and without 100 milligrams of alpha lipoic acid over a 6-hour period. The vitamin C plus alpha lipoic acid, that blue line shows a lower level that it would be in the plasma. Why would that be lower? Well, it's leaving the plasma and getting into the immune system cells. So this is an example of how it's going where it belongs in the body. Now let's talk about vitamin D. It's known as 125 OHD technically, but we all think of it as vitamin D3. Acts as immune system modulator, again, helping the balance, helps prevent the excessive expression of cytokines, which are the components of a firestorm of the symptoms we talked about earlier. And so it's the oxidative burst potential of macrophages that we want to modulate. But most importantly, it dramatically stimulates the expression of peptides found in neutrophils, monocytes, natural killer cells, epithelial cells, these part of our white blood cells that line the respiratory tract, where they play a major role in protecting the lung from environmental factors. And a study here on volunteers that were inoculated with vitamin with live attenuated influenza virus are more likely to develop fever and serological evidence of immune response in the winter. What that means is people in the wintertime that don't take supplemental vitamin D typically don't have as high a blood levels of vitamin D and are more likely to have symptoms when inoculated with this live nasal vaccine compared to other times. So recent evidence confirms that lower respiratory tract infections are more frequent and sometimes dramatically so in those with low vitamin D levels. And getting back to selenium helps to boost the immune system, modulate the immune response in mice challenged with reactive agents. Animals deficient in selenium had much poorer outcomes than those whose diets were supplemented with this antioxidant. And then let's turn our focus to zinc, studied for its role in immune responses in respiratory tissues. So zinc is an essential trace element crucial for growth and development and the maintenance of healthy immune functions. We talked about this earlier. And zinc status is a critical factor that can influence immunity. Now let's turn our focus to select now products for immune support. Some important probiotic strains are Bifidobacterium lactis BL04, found in a number of our probiotic products, and the LA14 that we talked about earlier, also found in many of our probiotic products as well. And we also have, again, 10 strain formulas in our probiotic 10, and those 10 strains, again, have been confirmed genetically as matched strains. They come in a variety of potencies, 25 billion, 50 billion, or 100 billion, and they're all dairy-free, soy-free, vegan, and gluten-free. Oral Biotic is our chewable, very pleasant tasting strawberry flavored lozenges to support ears, nose, and throat health in young and old. It contains the Bliss K12 that we talked about earlier. It also can help reducing bad breath, which is a nice plus for some people. And then we also have fructooligosaccharides, or otherwise known as FOS, that can provide some prebiotic nutrient support for the growth of the Bliss bacteria. Allied Biotics CF is a really good seller for us. Immune system support. It has the benefits of elderberry, olive leaf extract, garlic extract, oregano oil, the arabinogalactans from large tree, the known trademarked immune enhancer, and rosemary oil. Just a fantastic product. And again, this product in overall balance helps reduce the oxidative stress, while it also supports the immune cells. Air Defense, product that we've had in our armamentum for a while. It was discontinued back last year. It is now coming back. So that's the good news. I had a lady that was asking me around the first of the year. She called up about 3 times, I think January, February, maybe March, and was just trying to clamor that we consider bringing it back. She said this product had done something for her that nothing else has ever had, and she's been struggling for a long time. So hopefully she'll find out that we will have it back again, and it'll be of help to her, but I don't have access to her contact information easily, so I'm not sure who it was, but I'm hoping that she'll find a way to find that this is coming back. Studies on Now's beta-1316 glucan. These studies that are on this page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, were all performed on our original 100 milligram beta-1316 glucan formula, which combined the Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast form of 1316 beta-glucans with maitake mushroom beta-glucans. And there are soluble and insoluble prebiotic fibers in those materials that kind of give it a synergism and perhaps a strength that neither one alone would be able to achieve, which is kind of neat. Colostrum, the pre-milk fluid from a mammal whether it's a whale or an elephant or a human or a cow and many other species, that supports healthy immune system in the newborn. It can also help. It is not species specific, so we can benefit from cow colostrum even though we are humans. It does contain naturally occurring immunoglobulins, minimum of 0.6% lactoferrin. Lactoferrin is an iron sequestering compound in this material that can help in the regulation of iron through the body. One of the mechanisms by which viruses and bacteria may replicate is by using iron. So lactoferrin can actually help in the sequestering or keeping it away from them so that they don't have a growth medium to feed their growth. It also can help increase bioavailability and absorption of nutrients and encouraging a healthy GI tract. I have recommended the combination of colostrum and probiotics to many mothers for their kids over the years, and that's just one combination that makes a lot of sense. We also have a combination product, super colostrum, which combines not only the colostrum but also the large arabinogalactans in good substantial amounts with olive leaf and astragalus root and eleuthero root. Now, eleuthero back in the day, 20, 25 years ago, and for years beyond that, before that, was known as Siberian ginseng. Siberian ginseng research out of Russia in the 1950s and 60s and 70s showed that it was an herbal adaptogen. An adaptogen is a botanical compound that produces a non-specific balancing effect on the physiology of the body. So it can be especially helpful in the stress response of the body, helping things to be more balanced. So it kind of makes sense in a formula like this. When people are under a lot of increased stress, there can be a tendency for their immune systems to be more weakened and for them to be more susceptible. So kind of makes sense to have adaptogenic compounds in formula to help that process along. Next, we have elderberry and zinc lozenges, which we've had in our product line for a long time. The elderberry concentrate, along with small amounts of echinacea and bee propolis and slippery elm bark. Slippery elm bark has long been used as a soother of the mucous membranes of the throat and as well as the GI tract, so that can help in the soothing and smoothing effects. We won't cover, I think, the other compounds in the interest of time. Here we have, again, a formula, Epicor Plus Immunity, which combines vitamin C and D3 and zinc and selenium and olive leaf extract along with Epicor, which is, again, a very excellent power-packed formula, which I very much rely upon. Immune Renew is a product that is an enhancement of T cell, and well, let's go back. Enhancement of T cell and natural killer cell activity with a high beta-1,3 glucan content can be achieved with a blend of various immune recharging medicinal mushrooms, such as ones we talked about, or we're going about to, along with standardized astragalus. So again, the Immune Renew contains what we talked about earlier: turkey tails, sun mushroom, maitake, cordyceps, black hoof, lion's mane, reishi, shiitake, and astragalus root extract. So nice combo. Now, we did talk before about that one review article from earlier this year that talked about many nutrients that are involved in immune system support. You'll find those in almost any typical multivitamin. And here's some of our examples, the Adam and the Eve formulas and Daily Vites, Echo Green, Liquid Multis, etc. So that forms a nice base for which we can also build and add to with other compounds. And many of us are familiar with the quercetin and bromelain, which is helpful for seasonal support. It is a free radical fighter, and combined with bromelain as an enzyme pineapple that supports a healthy immune response. Bromelain is also known as a compound that can help with the digestion of protein in foods. If we take it with a meal, bromelain could help in that regard. But when bromelain is taken more on an empty stomach, and the quercetin and bromelain is advised on an empty stomach, it helps in the digestion of foreign debris, waste materials, and dead cells in the body. So it helps in the house cleaning effects, which is important. Next, we have Resperol for respiratory support. It does feature the quercetin and the bromelain, which you can see at the bottom of that chart, along with nettle extract and licorice root, which are also beneficial compounds with, again, the vitamin C, B6, pantothenic acid, which helps the adrenal glands with adrenal support, which is adrenal glands are our primary gland involved in the stress response in the body, which needs maximum support when we are under stress. They also contain some calcium, magnesium, and again, zinc to help in that regard as well. So here's a kind of a summary of the nutrients that can help support immune functions and the inflammatory response. And we talked about quercetin already, and bromelain, and licorice root also supports a healthy adrenal stress response as well. FRC is a neat compound because it contains transport C+, which we'll talk about in a moment. It's sugar-free, nice elderberry sweet flavor. It contains some vitamins and minerals, and it also has 500 milligrams of a 10-to-1 elderberry concentrate per packet. So that is a good substantial amount. So what is transport C+? It's a unique form of vitamin C, combines buffered calcium ascorbate with alpha lipoic acid, which potentially increases vitamin C uptake, which we talked about earlier, by the immune system T cells and other cells, as well as increasing the potency of vitamin C throughout the body. So that's a helpful compound to have with the vitamin C. And we talked about vitamin D earlier. We have a number of vitamin D products. Here's a sampling of some of them, and we have others. The RDAs were revised back 10 years ago from 400 to 600 IUs daily, and vitamin D is involved in calcium absorption and transport, bone matrix, tooth health, cardiovascular health, insulin and glucose metabolism, which few people can appreciate that, and helps in the support of immune functions, which we talked about earlier. Also, many of you may know that due to FDA labeling guidelines that have been in the works for a few years, labels now are changing for how a fat-soluble nutrient like vitamin D is expressed now in terms of not an international unit. It is on label still, but as micrograms. Typically, it could be 25, 50 micrograms, 100 micrograms, whatever, depending on the formula, instead of an international unit, which is a measure of biological activity, but not a unit of weight. So the FDA has been, advising and regulating that nutrient labels contain that. Same concept applies to vitamin E, where we used to say 400 IUs. That is a smaller amount of that in milligram amounts. So we're not here to talk about that today, but that is something to be aware of. And it's going to take a while for us to all to kind of remember these conversions and learn these conversions. Here's a new product, Eldermune. It contains a 65-to-1 elderberry concentrate, solvent-free, and retains all the elderberry components because it comes from elderberry juice concentrate. It also includes sun fiber, which is a prebiotic fiber, helps to replace the fiber loss during juicing. And as we know, prebiotics help to support the growth of probiotic bacteria, and that gets back to an immune system defense hopefully more vigorously. There's also 200 milligrams of vitamin C added to that as well. And we acquired Super Nutrition last September, and here's a product that they've had in their arsenal for a long time. It is a really power-packed formula. Now you notice that the serving size is 8 tablets a day. You don't have to take 8. It's be a powerful product if you took half that much, but it does contain a good, significant amount of vitamin A, 5,000 IUs. Vitamin C is 1,500 milligrams in 8 tablets, 4,000 IUs of vitamin D, 800 IUs of vitamin E. The vitamin K is the MK7, the monoquinone 7 form, 180 micrograms, which is a researched amount of vitamin K2. Good amount of the B complex, methylcobalamin, 1,000 micrograms, 1,000 milligrams of calcium, and 600 milligrams of magnesium, and on and on. Selenium, 250 micrograms. This is a powerful formula. Go over to the right-hand column, you'll see N-acetylcarnitine, but also next to that, N-acetylcysteine, which many people like to take as a separate supplement. And here's alpha-lipoic acid, beta-1,3 glucans. We can go on and on. Look at the whole food and herb base to this, the quercetin, which we talked about, rose hips, and etc. So this is a fantastic formula that is power-packed. Tablets are large, so not for people who have trouble swallowing a large pill, but it can be a great thing to do. And it may take the place of some of the other supplements that one might be taking. So it can be sometimes easier and simpler for a person to open up their bottle a few times a day and take all these nutrients instead of opening up a lot of different bottles. So then we're going to end with the C1000 and zinc, which is a new formulation in the Super Nutrition line. Combines vitamin C in the form of ascorbic acid, along with zinc bisglycinate. The TRAACS is a true amino acid chelate, which is the Albion company, who's been a long-standing company, has done amino acid research, mineral research with combining various amino acids to facilitate absorption and transfer through the body. They've been involved in animal nutrition for probably 50 years and human nutrition for at least 35 that I can recall. And so anyway, this is considered superior nutrient absorption in bisglycinate form. So that ends my talk, and we'll turn it back over to Sue. Thank you, Neil, for the slides again.
And thank you, Jim. Excellent presentation, and I'm sure it was certainly welcomed during this time. I always enjoy hearing what products we have and what they're good for. Let me see if I can get Neil back on the phone here. Neil, are you with us? Oh, there you are. We did get one question.
You know what? Before you do that, a couple of quick points. There is also an iron-free version of the Super Nutrition Super Immune Multi.
Good. Yes, because I was talking before about iron and being possibly not so good a thing to have for the feeding bacteria and viruses. So I would prefer personally to have that option.
Yeah, the trick on the iron is that it depends partially on diet. Like a vegetarian might need iron more than someone else. An older person would tend to need less iron because it may accumulate in the body, especially women after menopause. And for older men, middle-aged and older men, typically iron-free is desirable, especially if they're meat eaters. But it's the free iron that becomes potentially harmful in the body, or too much iron. And iron is controlled with things like polyphenols and other free radical fighters, antioxidant type compounds in the body. So, this is a little complicated, but iron itself is an essential nutrient. It's one of the nutrients that is well known worldwide as causing health problems if it's in short supply in the body. So we do want to make sure that people get adequate iron, not too much iron, and have these antioxidant type compounds like polyphenols and bioflavonoids and things that control the iron in the body so it does not become so much of a fuel for overgrowth of organisms.
Great point. Thank you, Neil. Also, some of those compounds that Neil just mentioned would be found also in the whole food and herb base of the super nutrition, super immune formula. So that may be a good counterbalance. And iron deficiency could lead to immune weakness in people. So again, as Neil was saying, enough iron without necessarily overdoing it. And if it's appropriate, the person may need this formula with the iron as well.
Okay. I did get something from Taylor here. So glad to know air defense is coming back.
Air defense actually is a formula I designed years ago to compete with airborne. And we first tried to come out with that as a drink mix, but when we used these strong extracts, it did not taste good. The original airborne was a Chinese herbal formula with really, really high vitamin A, which is kind of scary. And who knows about the heavy metals or pesticides from the Chinese herbs. Of course, airborne has been bought by a pharmaceutical company and has changed their recipes and formulas. So it's not the same as it was back in that day. But this was basically designed to give a more Western version with clinically valid herbs and botanical extracts that would kind of mimic what airborne was trying to do with the original formula, but in a more responsible way.
Yeah, and in a better way too.
Okay. Here, I did get another question. Are there any special attributes that make our form of quercetin better than the others?
Yes, quercetin is fat soluble, and it's best taken with meals or fatty substances, about a teaspoon. There are some better absorbed forms. We used to carry one, we don't now, that are solubilized or attached to things like fats that help them absorb. But generally, the absorption is driven by your fat absorption process. So we do have quercetin with bromelain. The bromelain does not enhance absorption, contrary to popular belief, but they do have some similar properties, some similar effects. So that's the reason they're used together. They're considered complementary in some forms. So it's just standard quercetin, just like you could have curcumin or curcumin phytosome or curcumin threonate, like the magtine. There's different forms. This is just the plain quercetin.
Okay. Does quercetin and ECGC enhance absorption of zinc?
I'm not aware of it.
Probably not. We know that green tea polyphenols interfere with absorption of iron, for example. So yeah. It's counterintuitive to think it would improve the absorption of minerals. It actually helps block the natural chelation of the minerals during digestion.
Okay. Now, as an aside, if we were using a true amino acid chelate, such as our zinc glycinate that we talked about, that would be less likely because those are shielded from some of the interfering factors in our diet.
Right, but it wouldn't be enhanced by those other nutrients.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. So that looks like it on the questions. And Joy from Canada said, thank you so much. It was a fantastic training. And Taylor says, awesome. Thank you for all the info. I learned a lot. So I guess we'll call it a day.
Can I go home early, teacher?
You can go home early. You probably have to walk from your office to your kitchen and you'll be home.
Yeah, it's a distance of 40 feet.
Well, there you go. There you go. Well, walk around a couple times, make you feel like you went somewhere. Always great stuff from our team. Thank you again, Jim and Neil. It's always a pleasure to work with you and always a pleasure to be a part of these webinars with everyone. So have a great day. Everybody have a great weekend coming up.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sue.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.